Hey, welcome back to Kimmell and Cox, your source for all things entertainment. I'm Keith Cox. I'm joined, as always, by my good friend Dylan Kimmell. If you've missed any of our previous episodes, be sure to go back and check those out. Nowadays, everybody likes to binge watch their shows, so why not binge watch a few episodes of Kimmell and Cox? I'm just saying,
Yeah, I mean, we have a playlist all set up and ready, so...
Yes,
yeah.
we have set up a playlist there. We've decided to do the show in a seasonal format as opposed to going year-round. So we'll be running episodes every Thursday probably until the last week in May. And then we'll take the summer off, and we'll be back with Season 2 somewhere around the first week in September. So I think that format is going to work really well for everybody, and plus it just gives us a chance to take a little break and kind of recharge a little bit. So but today is a special episode. This is our first ever celebrity profile, and it's a good one. The subject of today's episode is someone who has tremendously influenced both of us in our careers and just in the way that we look at movies in general. We are talking about the one, the only, the legendary Dan Aykroyd. So I'm really excited about that. I've really been looking forward to this episode.
You gave me goosebumps.
Yeah. I think it's going to be great. So let's just jump right into it. Daniel Edward Aykroyd, born July 1st, 1952, in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Yes, Dan Aykroyd is Canadian.
It seems like every person that I really enjoy is Canadian.
Yeah, there are so many performers and filmmakers out there that I can think of, and people that we enjoy that are Canadian, many of which whom I'm sure will have an entire podcast episode devoted to them as well. Dan Aykroyd grew up in Canada, a man of many talents, actor, writer, producer, director, and singer. So he's kind of a jack of all trades. He had kind of an interesting background growing up. His father was a civil engineer, and I believe was an advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada at one point.
Wow.
So a little bit of pedigree there, a little bit of distinguished background. His mother was a secretary. Oddly enough, growing up, he after graduating high school, he studied criminology and sociology in college at Carleton University, but obviously didn't pursue that. Actually, didn't even end up graduating from college.
Oh yeah.
But I thought that was interesting. That was kind of his, initially his chosen, I guess, maybe a career path that he was considering or something.
Right.
But he also, his family was very heavy into spiritualism, the study of ghosts, which will come into play very significantly a little bit later in his career after he becomes an actor. We'll tell you more about that in a little bit. But yeah, there was a big family history there. His great-grandfather, his grandfather, his father, all were heavy into studying spiritualism, and actually his father wrote a book called The History of Ghosts, and I believe his grandfather wrote a book as well.
I believe so. Yeah.
Or he was recognized in I think it's called like the American Journal of Psychical Research or something like that.
Yeah. Some sort of big words.
But yeah, his family was published in that area. So, but again, just some really cool little factoids about his background.
Yeah.
He was also he was born with a couple of unique conditions. One of which is called heterochromia, which means that he has one green eye and one blue eye, which I'm assuming that whenever he does a movie or makes a television appearance, that he's wearing contacts. But the odd thing about that is that when you see him on screen, it looks like his eyes are brown. So it's interesting that he would choose brown contacts as opposed to either blue or green. I don't know. Maybe the darker contacts it makes it easier to cover up his natural pigmentation in his eyes.
Possibly.
And he also has webbed feet, if you can believe that. It's called, I think the medical term for it is called syndactylism. So some of his toes are actually like fused together, which is really, it's like, I mean, this doesn't have anything to do at all with his career, but I just think these are like interesting facts. I think it's cool to know these kinds of things about celebrities, and because that's not always something that would necessarily be shared.
It kind of makes you, but it makes you realize that they're human.
Yeah.
You know, that's all that it is. There is to it. They're just human. You know, there's going to be
just like anybody else. You know,
there's going to be a few blemishes here and there,
and perhaps something that is a little more common, and that other people out there would be able to relate to a little bit more, is that he was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome early on, but with treatment, actually most of the symptoms went away by the time he was like 14.
Fascinating.
So they were able to successfully treat that. And he has also said in interviews that he's kind of self-diagnosed with Asperger's, which is a form of autism. He was never officially diagnosed with that, but he said that he kind of diagnosed himself based on what he knows about Asperger's and certain traits and characteristics in his own personality that he believes that he has that. And many people who have that, they're highly intelligent, almost genius level, which certainly is an accurate description, I think, of Dan Aykroyd. He just in his writing and the kinds of characters that he creates and his ability to spew out these ungodly bits of dialogue, most of which contain a lot of technical jargon.
English. That's English to him. So
yeah, I mean it's kind of become a signature for him, really. Like I think there's probably a scene, at least one scene in almost every movie of his, where his character has a long string of dialogue like that, and he spews it out very quickly, which makes it that much funnier.
And it is a very interesting thing. I mean, I went ahead and rewatched a few movies because there's a few of them I haven't seen in a long while. And I rewatched a few of them. Even like pretty much every single bit of dialogue that he will blurt out, it's like full-on intelligence through the roof type of dialogue. And it doesn't even have to be a huge scientist character,
No, he somehow finds a way to work that in to every character, which tells me that he's, he is putting himself, some of himself, into those characters, because that's totally him.
Yeah. I would say a particular role that we'll get into later is probably him, the closest to him. Actually, probably more so a different character in the same movie, honestly. But
yeah. Well, yeah. Let's get into talking a little bit about how he got started in his acting career, because actually before he became an actor, believe it or not, he was a postal worker. He actually worked for the Canadian Postal Service.
Oh, wow.
As a mail sorter, and I believe he also drove a mail truck. So that was interesting. And then he was always heavily influenced by music, particularly the blues. And early on, he actually managed an after-hours speakeasy in Toronto called Club 505,
Okay.
and he actually did that for several years, and then eventually, he transitioned into performing, and he became a member of the famous Second City comedy group.
Yes.
And he was actually a part of both the Toronto and Chicago.
Oh, really?
Groups. Yeah.
Both of them.
So he bounced back and forth because he does actually have dual citizenship in Canada and the United States. So he was able to. That's how he was able to go, back and forth so easily. And he actually met, while he was running that club, and when he was part of the Second City group, he actually met John Belushi in a nightclub in Chicago, and that would end up forming a years-long friendship with him that would end up turning out some really good movies, as well as we will see how that friendship really just took both of their careers to a different level.
Yeah.
So they met, and actually he shared some of his music with John, because John was really into like rock and heavy metal at the time.
That fits.
Yeah, definitely fits with his just wild, unpredictable personality.
Yeah.
But Dan shared some blues records with him. He had never really listened to blues. He had never heard a blues record, and he immediately fell in love with it himself. And this would later play a big part in two of the most famous characters that Dan Aykroyd ever came up with. So a couple of years after Second City, and we're just going to get into some career highlights here. We're not going to do a really deep dive because you all are resourceful people, so you can go on IMDb, aka the Internet Movie Database, and you can find a more comprehensive list of Dan Aykroyd's credits there. But we're just going to hit some of the highlights, the shows and movies and everything that he was involved with that we feel like are really, you watch these, when you think of Dan Aykroyd, you think of
these movies. Yeah. Are we going to go from the probably the lesser known top? I mean, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few in there that may be lesser known or less popular that are worth mentioning too.
Yeah, I'd say less popular.
But the big thing that even though he had done a few things before this, we really kind of have to start when you think of his career. You really have to start with his time on Saturday Night Live. Mm-hmm. So he was part of the very first group of cast members ever on Saturday Night Live, 1975. And so he was part of the original, what they nicknamed the not ready for primetime players. Because the format, as many of you know, with Saturday Night Live being a late night show, they didn't have the restrictions that other shows that aired earlier in the day would have, and so they had a lot more freedom to kind of do some risque things, and they were revolutionary for the time, and the types of content and the political humor and stuff. They didn't hold anything back, and for those days, it was really almost taboo. Now it's just commonplace, but the things they were doing back then, it was huge, and people were literally having parties at their house every Saturday night to watch Saturday Night Live. So originally he was actually hired as a writer for Saturday Night Live, but he was bumped up to a cast member before the series started. And obviously, the producers saw a lot of potential in him because of his unique sense of humor, his writing ability, and just his comedy is unlike anything else out there. And even today, I think he stands up as one of the best cast members ever to be on the show, because the characters he came up with, he really can't be imitated.
No.
He has put such a different kind of spin on everything.
That era of Saturday Night Live is probably, when I think of Saturday Night Live, it's that era, and then only like a little bit of like the '90s era, where you got David Spade and Adam Sandler and all them. Right. But it's mainly that era, his era, Dan Aykroyd's era, that I'm thinking of the most.
Yeah. I agree. I think really after the 90s, maybe late 90s to early 2000s, I feel like it's kind of gone downhill. I haven't watched SNL regularly in a very long time. I honestly don't even know who the cast is now. That's how long it's been for me.
I probably don't know either. It probably changed since last time I.
But so that was the big break in his career. Starring on that show. And he just came up with so many memorable characters. You had like Irwin Mainway, who was like a sleazy. He was like a sleazy. He manufactured like children's toys, but they were always like really, really dangerous children's toys, like a bag of glass or something like that. And he was always going on these talk shows and trying to promote this stuff. E. Buzz Miller, who was like a late night talk show host. Beldar Conehead. And of course, Elwood Blues, which Jake and Elwood Blues, the Blues Brothers, they were not created on Saturday Night Live. They had actually, and we'll kind of get into this more if we ever, we'll do an episode about the Blues Brothers, but actually, he and John Belushi had been performing in character as Jake and Elwood in various clubs around New York and other places.
Yeah.
But their first public appearance, or at least television appearance, was on Saturday Night Live. So that's where everybody first saw them, and so they thought that those characters were created through SNL. And gosh, there's just so many others that I can think of. We can't forget about Fred Garvin, male prostitute. I mean, where it's like, it's like, where would somebody come up with things like that? I mean, only the mind of Dan Aykroyd.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, certainly a lot of great people came out of that group of cast members, and it really helped to launch a very long movie career. Probably the first movie that I would say that's even worth mentioning or talking about was in 1979. It was a movie called 1941.
Oh yes, yes.
Which it's a World War II comedy directed by Steven Spielberg, actually, in one of the few straight comedies that he has ever done.
I can't recall him doing too many comedies like that ever again.
No.
It didn't really go too well at the box office, though, did it?
No, it was not really well received. It's worth watching. It is funny. It does have some great moments. It's the first movie that Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi worked on together, although they didn't. Their characters didn't interact with each other. They only had one scene together in the whole movie, and it was a funny moment because the two of them just kind of like stopped and kind of looked each other up and down for a second, like they had this flash of recognition, almost like they knew each other.
Wait a minute.
Which was a little bit of a nod to the fact that they already had a well-established real-life friendship. So I thought, that was really good. But it's watchable. I wouldn't put it on the list of his greatest movies, but it was his first really big feature film after being on SNL, and then his second collaboration with John Belushi will perhaps always be his best, which is of course the Blues Brothers.
Yes,
when they decided to make a movie, and to kind of delve into these characters a little bit more, because people had only seen them on SNL, and this was the weird thing. It took off so well on SNL that they became a legitimate singing group. They
did.
already had an album out by that point, which was their best-selling album, Briefcase Full of Blues. It was their first album. It was released in 1978 at the height of their popularity on SNL. And they were touring, and they were opening for acts like Steve Martin, and so everybody was already familiar with the Blues Brothers before the movie. Some people out there think that the whole Blues Brothers thing started with the movie, but that's not the case. They were already established characters by then. But Dan Aykroyd wanted to explore those characters a little bit further, and where did they come from? How did they come to be? And it's certainly, out of the three movies that he and John Belushi worked on together, it is by far the best, and is also one of Dan Aykroyd's best movies ever.
That is also one of the very few musical movies that I will watch.
Yeah. Musicals can sometimes be a little bit taxing on it's a little overkill sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, very, very entertaining movie, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. Dan Aykroyd has the rare distinction of starring in two movies that are in my top 10 greatest movies of all time for me.
The interesting thing about Dan Aykroyd that I've really I've started to notice a little bit. Very few times has he actually been just the one lead. He's actually been co-lead.
Right, and it seems those movies seem to do better for some reason, as opposed to when he gets top billing in the movie. I agree. It's when he co-stars with someone, or if he's part of an ensemble cast, those movies tend to be a lot more successful.
Yeah.
And while he can certainly carry a movie because he has he has the personality and everything for that, and the charisma, he definitely has a collaborative nature about him. And I think that's what works so well, is he's not afraid to let somebody else have the bigger laugh.
Yeah, he's not greedy for it.
No, and it sometimes makes him even funnier by comparison. For doing that, it's he makes other people look good, and then they also make him look good. And then the third and final movie that he did with John Belushi is, to me, is by far the worst. I mean, I've only seen it once. That was enough for me. But it was a movie called Neighbors in 1981. And interestingly enough, Dan Aykroyd's character, Vic, in that, he has blonde hair and blue eyes. This, to my knowledge, it's the only movie that Dan Aykroyd has ever done where he has different colored eyes, where he has blue eyes. And that kind of goes back to that little piece of trivia that we told you about with his condition about having two different colored eyes. So I'd have to assume that one of those blue eyes is actually his, and that they just put contacts in to match the other one. But anyway, it's not, the movie's really not even worth like getting into or talking about it. It's just not great. But if you are a fan of the Belushi and Aykroyd team, then certainly worth checking out, because that was the last movie they did together. Because unfortunately, John Belushi passed away the very next year in 1982 from a drug overdose. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not kind of, but it really is quite unfortunate that we didn't get more collaboration with those two, because I feel like, it's almost weird in a way that okay, so Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi, I had to wait a moment there to make sure I got the right Belushi out of my mouth, because of course.
Oh yeah, because James Belushi has been an actor for a very long time. Yeah. Is still active. So.
Yeah, I had to make sure that I got the right Belushi out, because I was like, wait, did I say the right one? I did. Okay. And the funniest thing is I completely forgot what I was saying.
Didn't know where you were going with that.
I completely forgot. Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay. I got it back. It's an interesting kind of thing. I don't know how to word it. Where Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi were this basically like a power couple type of deal with their movies.
They were just a perfect comedy team.
And then John Belushi passed away due to that drug overdose. And then decades later, similar Saturday Night Live best friends, David Spade and
Chris Farley.
Chris Farley ends up passing away too in a similar fashion.
I noticed some parallels there too.
That's honestly kind of eerie in a way.
It's freaky. Yeah. But because Chris Farley idolized John Belushi.
He did, didn't he?
Actually, the crazy thing was that he passed away at the same age.
Oh wow!
As John Belushi, just really, really spooky parallels there between their lives, but
eerie and sad at the same time.
Yeah.
But regardless, we still end up getting some great things from Dan Aykroyd afterwards. I'd say he took a lot of that pain that he had from losing that friendship, and he did what he did best.
Yeah, it as much as that crushed him and rocked his world, it certainly didn't take him down, didn't hurt his career, because I would argue that his career just continued to skyrocket. Even after that. Actually, 1983 was a pretty big year for Dan Aykroyd in movies, beginning with Dr. Detroit. Don't know if you've seen that.
I have not actually, no.
You should definitely check it out. It's not a movie that is usually mentioned as one of his greatest, but I think it's good. I think it's it's definitely showcases his ability to come up with these off-the-wall, zany characters. He plays Professor Clifford Skridlow, who is this really nerdy guy. He's a little, he's got all of these quirky personality traits, and just your typical nerd, really. Somebody that most people probably wouldn't pay attention to or whatever. And he inadvertently gets caught up in this with pimps and hookers and he ends up taking on this. He basically the girls, these hookers, they've gotten themselves into a big mess, and so he agrees to help them out, and he takes on this personality of he creates this alter ego called Dr. Detroit, who is the opposite of Clifford. He's kind of a badass in his own way, and he's confident but you really should check it out. It is worth watching, and a lot of great characters in there. And actually, Dan Aykroyd met his wife, Donna Dixon, on the set of that movie.
Oh, wow.
And they've been together ever since 1983. And they also would go on to work together in a few other movies. But Fran Drescher was also in Dr. Detroit. Some of you may know she went on to star in the TV series The Nanny later on. So they were all like really good friends, and Fran Drescher kind of was responsible for setting up Dan and his wife Donna. And so the three of them have been very good friends for many years.
I can see it. I can see them getting along. Just their personality types and everything, because she's kind of out there too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and also he managed to get a little cameo appearance by James Brown in the movie, which they had already worked together on the Blues Brothers. Yeah. Because the Blues Brothers featured a lot of great singers and musicians from from the blues and other genres, and it's sort of, for some of them, it's sort of like reinvigorated their careers as artists. I say so, yeah.
So he was actually pretty good friends with James Brown and was able to get him in Dr. Detroit as well. And that sequence where James Brown performs one of his signature songs, "Get Up Off of That Thing," is a great scene. It's one that should not be missed. There's some choreography and everything in there. And then also that same year, Trading Places, which is a comedy classic with Eddie Murphy and Jamie Lee Curtis co-starring.
Oh, yes. The funniest thing is that I actually never seen that movie until last night, actually.
Really?
Yeah. I watched it last night. For the very first time I watched it. And it's great because you had Dan Aykroyd, who had already been on SNL, and then Eddie Murphy at that time was currently on SNL, and he was already rising to fame and popularity. So yeah, he was the hot sought after comedian at the time. It was an interesting picture, I have to say. I've not having seen it before. It is. It's an interesting. It's very interesting that it's actually pretty relevant even today. Just the what it's actually saying. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are some jokes in there that might be a little bit dated now, but
some of the humor maybe would not
wouldn't fly anymore. but what it's trying to say is still relative. But it's still pretty funny too. I mean, of course, you got Dan Aykroyd in his hilarity. It's really because of him and Eddie Murphy, because of how funny and kind of out there they both are. Honestly, Eddie Murphy's kind of scaled back his in recent years, but he's pretty much been the straight man now. But back then it was booming. And but yeah, I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Yeah, so. It was definitely it definitely belongs up there with some of his best movies, I think. And then you had Twilight Zone, the movie, also that same year.
Now, I remember actually seeing that movie when I was probably 7 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that first opening
that probably freaked you out a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It did. I was like, oh, my goodness, no. Change the channel. Change it back. I changed it back.
I mean, the Twilight Zone series was freaky.
I mean, yeah.
It was scary.
Black and white. You wouldn't... I don't think anyone, like modern-day kids, probably wouldn't think a black and white show would be scary. That show is scary. I mean, black and white or not, it's...
Yeah, there's something about that kind of adds to the suspense.
You want to see something really scary?
Want to see something really scary?
Yeah, that's a great moment. Dan Aykroyd only appears at the beginning and the end of the movie because the movie is set up in kind of this vignette style where there's like all these like little stories within the movie. And so they don't. It's not really clear whether the hitchhiker at the beginning of the movie plays a hitchhiker, and the ambulance driver at the end. It's not really clear if it's supposed to be the same character, or if it's the guy. I won't spoil that for you, but the guy that he scares, like at the end, we're not sure if maybe if he's just hallucinating or something, and he thinks the ambulance driver is Dan Aykroyd's character. That part of it is not really clear. But.
Yeah, it's kind of vague, but maybe that's for the best. Leave it to the audience's interpretation. Yeah, it makes it a little bit creepier.
And this was, I believe, the Twilight Zone was actually the second time that Dan Aykroyd had worked with John Landis.
Oh, really?
No, I'm wrong. Third time. Because John Landis directed Trading Places as well. So that starting with the Blues Brothers, that began a long time collaboration with director John Landis, and a couple little pieces of trivia. Actually, I think before, I guess. Well, yeah, it was before everything happened with John Belushi. Originally, Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi were considered for the lead roles in An American Werewolf in London.
Oh, really?
And they really wanted them, but at that time, John Landis had decided that he wanted to work with new actors. He wanted to work with new faces because he had already worked with Dan and John before.
Yeah, so that role end up going to... I want to get the. It was David Naughton.
Okay. Was the lead.
Yeah.
And which is another, it's unrelated, but that's a really good movie as well. And then something I forgot about actually, going back to Dan's time on SNL, he was originally considered actually, he was the front runner for the role of D-Day in the movie Animal House, which was released in 1978.
Interesting.
And because of his his a penchant for creating these like really crazy characters, and also because if you've seen Animal House, D-Day is like a biker, and Dan Aykroyd has a love of motorcycles. He actually for a while was actually part of a motorcycle club called the Black Diamond Riders.
I could have actually seen him play that role, honestly.
Yeah, I could have too. And the only reason he didn't was because Saturday Night Live would not let him out. Because John Belushi was already starring in it.
Yeah.
And so Lorne Michaels actually threatened to fire Dan Aykroyd if he had done the movie, because he felt like he was too valuable to SNL. Like they couldn't afford to have two of their star cast members gone, to film a movie. So, but that's just a little interesting tidbit there. So moving on up to the next year, 1984, would probably, aside from the Blues Brothers, this would probably turn out to be, in terms of lifelong success and everything. This was probably the biggest, maybe the biggest for Dan Aykroyd, because that was the year that Ghostbusters was released, which is arguably my favorite movie of all time.
Yes, that is his magnum opus right there.
Yeah.
I'd say that he would be forever and ever associated with Ghostbusters far more than Blues Brothers. Yeah. I mean, I know Blues Brothers is probably close to his heart just as well.
They're both iconic.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ghostbusters is everywhere. Still everywhere today.
I mean, Ghostbusters, the two animated series, several movies now, like 4 movies now.
Yeah.
I mean, if
three
in the main
that
line
are canon, and one that was a reboot, which is not part of the same universe.
Right.
And then you had the animated 2 animated series.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of course, the one animated series I grew up on, while the other one you grew up on.
Yeah.
Which is funny because honestly, you got the better one. I got the hand me down.
Yeah.
What is this? Like,
right.
Honestly, they were probably piggybacking off of the Men in Black, because Men in Black having a similar animation to that one. They were piggybacking off of the success of that, I'd say. But yeah, Ghostbusters is another one that means a lot to me as well. I even got a little bit of an autograph here.
Yeah, he's actually, that's more than I've got. I have unfortunately never been able to. Well, neither of us have met him,
No.
but
No.
At least you got the the autograph, which is cool.
Yeah, and funny story about that is I was as I was telling you before we started filming here, that it was a funny story because this was before even the reboot came out. And it was a little bit after the video game came out, which the video game, I'd say that before the third one came out, we kind of considered it non-canonical, sort of canonical,
right.
because Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd both wrote the script.
Yeah. I think the 2009 video game is definitely canon. I mean, for a while we thought that was going to sort of serve as a third movie because they had been talking about doing a third movie for so long, even as far back as like 1999, and we just got to a point where we're like, is this ever going to happen? The video game came out. It's like it wasn't a movie, but it was almost just as good because all the original cast was back.
Yeah. I mean, and the funny thing is like after I played that video game, hearing the rumbles of the third one coming out and everything, I ended up trying to find out, looking it up and, just writing a letter to him saying, hey, I hear this third one's happening. It may not happen. I know it's been decades. But if you do, could I be in it somehow or whatever? Kid's dream.
Oh, sure.
And if not, then an autograph will do fine. I got an autograph. So.
There you go. It's better than nothing, and that's something that you can keep forever and frame it, hang it up on your wall. And, Funny story about that too is I actually, this was back in like the late 90s. I contacted him in a different way. This was back in the days of dial-up internet. Most of you out there won't have any clue what that is, but this is when it you used to have to run the internet through a phone line, and it was so slow, it was ridiculous, just trying to load pages and everything. But anyway, I was on AOL, America Online. That was the big. That was the big like, email provider and everything back then. And you had AOL Instant Messenger, which was like a chat. Instant. Like today, it would be like Facebook Messenger and things like that. It was that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I found him. I found Dan Aykroyd on AOL.
Oh, really?
And and I looked at the stats. Like I looked at his birth date and little pieces of, like where you fill out your profile.
Yeah.
And I was like, this has to be him, because I mean obviously it would be easy. You could fake something like that.
Yeah.
But based on his details, I'm like, it has to be him, because there were things in there that nobody else would have like known about at the time, unless you were a fan. And so I sent him a quick message, and because he was starring in a TV series at the time, and I told him that I had been watching it, and we'll get into that in a little bit here, but it was a TV show called Soul Man. Which was on in 1997. It was actually a spinoff of Home Improvement. But anyway, told him how much I enjoyed the show and how much I was a fan. And I'm sure he will not remember that at all. But he actually wrote back. He actually messaged me back, and just a few little things, said thank you, more or less, thank you, glad you're enjoying the show, and and all that. And that was huge to me. I was like,
yeah.
I actually got I got to have a little exchange with one of my favorite actors. So yeah, so there you go. So that's the closest I've ever come to talking to him or meeting with him. But,
we both came close.
Yeah, close, but not.
But at least in some way or another, he knows that we had admired him, as well as countless other fans.
Yeah. Some other movies worth mentioning, and we'll just kind of roll through these. Spies Like Us, 1985, which he co-starred with Chevy Chase on that. One of his fellow SNL alums. Very funny movie. Another one of my favorite Dan Aykroyd movies. It's one that I could watch over and over again. The jokes are so great in that. The little quips and the one-liners and the back and forth. It's just great. You had two comedy powerhouses together in that movie, and Dan Aykroyd's then wife, Donna Dixon, also had a starring role in that. And oddly enough, she ends up becoming the girlfriend of Chevy Chase's character in the movie. But yeah, that's one, when you think about Dan Aykroyd's career, definitely have to throw that one into the mix. 1987, Dragnet.
Dragnet.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Based on the TV series. Well, there were actually two different TV series. There was the one from the 1950s, and then they sort of rebooted. There was a revival series in the 60s, and they just retitled it Dragnet 1967 because it ran from 67 to 70. But the characters were the same. The actors were the same. And so the movie was based on that TV series, because Dan Aykroyd was always a big fan of Jack Webb, who played the original Sergeant Joe Friday. In the movie, he plays the late Joe Friday's nephew, who is also named Joe, named after his uncle. And Harry Morgan plays the captain this time. Originally, Harry Morgan played Bill Gannon, who was Joe Friday's partner in the original series. So now he's a captain. And Dan Aykroyd is partnered with Pep Strebeck, who is played by Tom Hanks. This was in the days when Tom Hanks was primarily doing comedy. He had been on a sitcom in the early 80s called Bosom Buddies that really sort of elevated him to stardom, and had started doing a series of movies. And but he's really great in the movie too. You have Joe Friday, who is very like that whole just facts ma'am kind of thing. He's very stoic and and Pep is the complete opposite of that. He's just like he's giving Joe headaches because he has a very unorthodox style of police work. But very funny movie. That's another one that is definitely worth checking out if you haven't seen it. The Couch Trip, 1988.
Not heard of that one.
That one is another one that it doesn't seem to get mentioned a lot, but it's pretty good. He plays John Burns, who is like a radio psychotherapist. Charles Grodin is in that movie as well. Okay. But it's good. It's pretty good. It's a little different. I like seeing the things where certain actors, you're used to seeing them in certain types of roles, and where they sort of veer off from that, just a little. They kind of veer away from the formula. Yeah. But it's not a bad movie. And this was, the late 80s, especially, that year, 1988, was another big year for Dan Aykroyd in terms of just, he had so many movies that came out that year. The Great Outdoors.
Yes.
That is...
I don't see too many. There's not very many family road trip, or not road trip, but family vacation movies that are really, really good.
Yeah.
But I'd say that I guess the ones that are actually really good are the ones that actually feature some of the Saturday Night Live alums, like Dan Aykroyd and Chevy Chase, and Great Outdoors is one of them.
Yeah, just putting him and John Candy together was another perfect combination.
And it's so funny because John Candy is playing a straight man on that one. He's playing the straight man on that one, where Dan Aykroyd is the one that's playing.
He's the comic foil.
Yeah.
Playing his yuppie brother-in-law who likes to show off, and he wants everybody to think that he has all this money, but then it turns out that he's flat broke, and he and his family show up unexpectedly during his brother-in-law Chet's vacation. Basically ruins their vacation. It was basically just showing up kind of for a handout. He's broke and he needs some money. But another really great movie. Then that same year, there was Caddyshack II. Mm-hmm. Now, Dan Aykroyd was not in the first Caddyshack.
A missed opportunity, if you ask me,
right.
Not being in the first one.
Because the first one is great. The second one didn't live up to that. Didn't live up to that standard.
I can't say that I've seen the second one.
Yeah, it's okay, but it has a good cast. But it just wasn't, it wasn't well received. It definitely was not at the same level as the original. The original had, comedy giants like Bill Murray and Chevy Chase and Rodney Dangerfield and Ted Knight, and the only one who came back for the second one was Chevy Chase. Dan Aykroyd plays a character that is kind of similar to Bill Murray's character in the first one, the groundskeeper, He wasn't a groundskeeper, but
Right.
the characters were very they were odd and quirky, and I will say this that is probably sorry Dan, but this is probably Dan Aykroyd's most annoying role. The only thing I can say is that the voice that he chose to use for that character is just really really grating. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a little bit of like going back to his parody of Julia Child, and
Okay.
it's like a combination of that and something else. I can't really put my finger on it, but it's like like he kind of talks like this the whole time, and it's like it's very yeah. But acting is all about choices, and
Sometimes
that's the choice he made for that character.
Sometimes you hit it, sometimes you miss it.
But it's another one of those movies that you check it out. I mean, it's worth watching at least once, but maybe not a repeat. And then also that same year, My Stepmother Is an Alien, which is I think is a good movie, pretty funny movie, because it's a little bit different again than what he's used to. He plays a scientist in that, and who ends up coming into contact with an extraterrestrial who is played by Kim Basinger in one of her earlier roles. But they worked really well together, and I think that the comedy between those two actually worked. But it's not a combination you would have necessarily thought of as working really well, but it does. And there's a little bit, it's kind of gave him a chance to, because he hadn't really had too many opportunities in his career where he sort of got to play the romance angle.
Right.
And so it sort of put him in this romantic lead situation, but I think it worked, really well. And then you had 1989. You had, of course, Ghostbusters 2. And we are definitely going to devote an episode to each of the films in the Ghostbusters franchise.
They both
deservedly so.
Yeah.
And
they both deserve one for each other, I'd say.
And the first Ghostbusters, hard to top.
Yeah.
But there are, believe it or not, there are aspects of Ghostbusters 2 that I think I actually enjoyed even more than the first film.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say there is a few elements in there. Maybe the cartoon might have hindered it a little bit.
Yeah, because the first animated series, the real Ghostbusters, was still going on at that time and was extremely popular. And I think the second movie was maybe marketed a little bit more towards kids for that reason.
Yeah.
But in some ways, I think the story, might have even been just a little bit better.
Yeah.
And the advantage in a sequel is that usually the first movie in a franchise has a tendency to be a little slower paced.
Yeah.
And sort of drags on a little bit, because you have to establish the characters. You have to establish their backgrounds and everything. With a sequel, you can just start right in out of the gate with the action, and everybody already knows who the characters are, so you don't have to waste any time with all that exposition and stuff.
Right. Yeah. It was much faster paced. That second one was, and I'd say, it's still pretty fun to watch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a great movie, and I think it gets far less credit among Ghostbusters fans than it really deserves. Another big feather in Dan Aykroyd's cap that year was his role in Driving Miss Daisy.
Oh, okay.
Playing Booley Worthen, who is the son of Jessica Lange's character in that movie, Daisy. It's a period movie, but actually was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in that movie. So that was certainly a great honor to just to even be considered for that, because again it was a departure from the types of roles that he was used to playing.
So it was certainly a big moment for him right there, just being recognized for something that's different than what you're usually doing. Kind of saying that, hey, you've got talent,
And it wasn't the first time either that he'd either been nominated or won an award, because actually he won an Emmy in 1977 for outstanding writing on SNL, and he was nominated several other times during his work on that show. So, yeah,
I can see that.
So he is also an award-winning actor, which is something that I think most actors or filmmakers or anybody within the entertainment industry aspires for, even though the awards really don't. I mean, it doesn't matter. It
doesn't really matter.
It's not. It's nice just to be considered or to. To
just to be recognized that, hey, you've got talent. Don't stress.
Things kind of slowed down a little bit. I feel like for Dan after that, it's in the '90s in particular. He kicked off the '90s with a pretty decent movie, 1990, Loose Cannons, which he co-starred with Gene Hackman. In that, where Dan Aykroyd actually plays an escapee from a mental hospital. But again, it's an interesting pairing, putting him with Gene Hackman, and it works pretty well. And Dan Aykroyd gets to sort of showcase his ability for impressions and and funny voices and things like that, which he did a lot of that on SNL too, by doing parodies of presidents like Jimmy Carter and Richard Nixon, and he's always had that gift as well. But pretty decent movie. There's not really, I feel like there's not a ton of stuff in the '90s that I would say, as far as his career is like really
probably
stand out.
I mean, aside from a little cameo in Casper, I can't.
Right. And there was Nothing But Trouble, which I think you and I have talked about that movie before.
Yes.
1991. Where he reunited with Chevy Chase for that. That was the only movie that he ever directed in his entire career. And I think the reason for that was because the movie just didn't do well at all. I think it actually lost money at the box office. I don't think it's a terrible movie. Like, so many people have put it down over the years and said this is like one of the worst movies they've ever seen in their life. I've seen much worse movies. I can promise you, I've seen much worse movies.
I have too.
It's not his best. It does showcase his writing ability again, because I think a lot of the movies, usually the movies where he is involved as a writer and an actor, tend to be really, really good. This is one of those that breaks away from that. He had a lot of good people around him. As far as his crew, people that had worked on award-winning movies and things. So visually, it was a pretty cool-looking film, but it just, as they continued filming, the budget just kept, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because he wanted to keep adding things to it, and they were having to build these elaborate sets and wanted more effects and things like that. But critics panned the movie. They didn't get it. They didn't, I guess, get his sense of humor and where he was going with it. They thought it was just full of a lot of like gross out visual gags, and they didn't think that it was really worth watching. And And thankfully, thankfully it didn't, because he already had such a huge career anyway. It's a good thing that it didn't hurt him, because sometimes something like that can cause someone's career to tank.
Yeah.
But he still had success even after that. He gradually, his role in movies gradually started to decrease.
They did decrease quite a bit.
It was one of the, there's a few more, but it was one of the last, I think, where he really had like a starring role, like where he was, in top billing.
Most recent years he's been just doing cameo roles for
Right.
Adam Sandler.
Some other movies worth mentioning during that decade of the 90s would be My Girl, which was a good movie. He's playing a family man, a dad, and thought he did a really wonderful job with both of those movies, because there were two of them. Sneakers was pretty good.
I've not seen that one.
1992. 93, you had Coneheads, which of course was based on
the SNL skit.
The SNL sketches, and pretty. It was pretty decent. I mean, usually the movies that are based on SNL sketches or characters, they either go one of two ways. Either they do really, really well, or they bomb completely.
Yeah. The standpoints from that, I'd say, that were the ones that were really good SNL skits turned into movies, Blues Brothers, and Wayne's World.
Wayne's World, yeah, it's another big one.
All the others, I can't. I mean, there was MacGruber.
Yeah,
was one.
A Night at the Roxbury I thought was funny.
That
Some
one
people didn't
actually
like
was like, it didn't do too well, but yeah, I agree. It was actually pretty funny. It was, yeah.
But I think this was, Coneheads was another attempt to maybe try to bank on the success of
you think that
like
one
the Blues Brothers, and
you think that one might have been a little too late?
I think it was a little bit too far removed from SNL, where the Blues Brothers was right there in that sweet spot. It was just after Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi had left, because they left Saturday Night Live in '79, and Blues Brothers came out in '80. So yeah, I think there was maybe a little bit too much distance there, and that could have. It was like you have to keep the characters in the public eye. You have to keep them relevant in everybody's mind in order for them to want to see a movie about those characters.
Yeah, I'd say that you just made a movie for an entirely different generation that did not grow up on that now. Because that's like, what, 2 decades removed?
Yeah. So yeah, that certainly played a part in it, I think. We mentioned the My Girl movies. The second movie came out in '94. You had, from there on, it was mostly, like we said, a lot of either cameos or significant but smaller roles, memorable roles in films.
Yeah.
Tommy Boy as the Zelensky, as he was the auto parts guy that was like in competition with Chris Farley's dad's character in that movie. Casper. Now, the only reason we mention Casper is because of probably one of the best Dan Aykroyd cameos ever in a movie.
Where
he actually appears as Dr. Raymond Stantz from Ghostbusters.
Casper's canon.
Yeah, it is. That's the funny thing. Ivan Reitman, who directed Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2, actually admitted in an interview that Casper is considered part of Ghostbusters canon. Not only because it was released by Columbia Pictures, which produced the Ghostbusters movies, but it fits in somehow. It fits in with the Ghostbusters universe, and so. And if you later on, if you watch the most recent Ghostbusters movie, it kind of fits with the timeline. Because basically by that point,
explains why he's all by himself.
Ray is by himself. The rest of the team is not with him.
So anyway, just go ahead and put that into your Ghostbusters watch-a-thon.
Yes, you can certainly add that to the Ghostbusters movie, even though it's a very quick appearance. But it's great and worth watching just for that reason. He did Sergeant Bilko.
Yeah, Sergeant Bilko.
In '96 with Steve Martin. The same year, he did Celtic Pride, which is actually a really funny movie. He co-starred with Daniel Stern and Damon Wayans in that movie.
That's the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah. Dan Aykroyd's character Jimmy is he and Daniel Stern's character. They're like Boston Celtics super fans, and at that time, the Utah Jazz is really just wreaking havoc on the Celtics, and so they get this brilliant idea that they're going to kidnap the star player of the Jazz, which is played by Damon Wayans, and a lot of really great jokes and great. I think that's probably of his slightly later career. I think that's one of the better. But there's some other pretty good movies there towards the end of the '90s. My Fellow Americans, where he plays a former president.
Mm-hmm. You know what? I couldn't get into that one, but that's probably because I'm not all that into the politics.
Yeah, and I'm usually not either. I'm not a very political person, but it had a great cast too.
Oh yeah, I will say
Jack
there was
Lemmon and James Garner. Of course, the sequel to the Blues Brothers 2000.
Oh
came
yes,
out in
with
'98.
John Goodman.
And
who played the kid?
I'm totally blanking out now. What is his name? Joe Morton. Morton. I can't believe I couldn't remember his name. But he, this was the weird thing is that the title was Blues Brothers 2000.
It didn't come out in the 2000s. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was intended to be released in 2000 as like a millennium kind of, this is the Blues Brothers for the millennium. I don't know. Who knows why these decisions get made in Hollywood, but from then on, John Goodman, it was hard to come up with somebody to replace, John Belushi, but John Goodman, I think, did a really
pretty good job.
He was playing a completely different character, obviously.
Yeah.
But he brought his own blend of comedy to it, and from then on he was accepted into the Blues Brothers family. It should also be noted that during the '90s, in 1992 actually, Dan Aykroyd founded the House of Blues.
Oh
so
yes.
For those who didn't know, the House of Blues is owned by Dan Aykroyd because his love of that music, and there are House of Blues locations all over the country, all over the world, really.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still performing today. He actually, along with James Belushi and sometimes special guest, John Goodman, they still tour. They have special concerts. Usually it's for like the opening of a new House of Blues location. But they're still, Dan Aykroyd is still performing today as Elwood Blues.
Yeah, I mean, I believe Dan Aykroyd did a little bit of a cameo appearance on one episode of According to Jim for Jim Belushi.
He did make an appearance on that show as well. I think maybe a couple of times.
Yeah.
And they're still, great friends today because, oddly enough, James Belushi actually has gotten into the cannabis business now, and he has a cannabis farm out in Oregon.
Oh, really?
And he has worked with Dan Aykroyd to put out one of their products is called the Working Man's brand, and it's like they're pre-rolled marijuana joints that come in like almost like a kind of looks like a pack of cigarettes. But he went to Dan and basically asked for his permission to use the Blues Brothers brand to sell that particular strain or whatever of that his product. And of course, Dan wasn't going to say no. He had some stipulations, certain things that he wanted, in the product.
Yeah.
But other than that, he gave his seal of approval and put his stamp on that. So that's out there now for those who like to partake. You can obviously you can't have it shipped to states where it's not legal.
Right.
But they are branching out. There's more and more states that are starting to offer that, where it's legal. But anyway, trying to think, we're kind of running low on time here. So there's so many things, so many more things that we could talk about. I guess some other things worth mentioning. Again, the rest of Dan's career is mostly made up of smaller roles and cameos.
Yeah.
Some that are definitely worth watching. I was thinking in particular about his roles in 50 First Dates.
Yes.
With Adam Sandler, where he plays a doctor.
Yeah.
It's a very funny role.
That one's pretty good.
And I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry.
That
Also
one.
with Adam Sandler, but with Kevin James as well, where he plays a fire department captain. Some of the most hilarious moments in that movie came from
that one's pretty funny
from
as
Dan
well.
Aykroyd.
Yeah. The funniest thing is that I'm even thinking of it's not really all that good. At least I don't think so. Christmas with the Cranks.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And you did like that?
Certainly.
It does have its moments. Yeah.
Favorite Christmas movies, I would probably stick that.
Probably would. Yeah.
But again, there's so many more things that we could cover. We could really go on and on about Dan and his career, but we have to wrap it up at some point. So I would encourage all of you definitely go on IMDb, take a look at just his massive list of credits, and start watching his movies.
There's a great catalog of movies there.
Yes.
You're gonna laugh your head off. I assure you.
Even the ones that are not, not outstanding or amazing. For a lot of them, just his presence in the movie, I think,
it really elevates it.
Makes them better. It elevates them. I don't know if Dan Aykroyd will ever see this episode or not, but if you do, Dan, we'd just like to say we hope we have the opportunity to meet you someday, just to shake your hand and say thank you. Thank you for infecting us with your unique sense of humor. Thank you for showing us what good writing looks like when it's brought to life on the screen. Thank you for inspiring a collaborative spirit in us. Thank you for showing us what it takes to create iconic characters that we will never forget. Thank you for shaping the way we look at movies. And just thank you for the monumental influence you've had on both of our careers. Thank you, sir. You are the best. Okay, well, that's just going to about wrap it up for today. But before we go, I just want to remind all of you, be sure to follow us on all of our socials. You'll find those links on the bottom of your screen, as well as down below in the video's description. You can also catch our podcast in a variety of other places besides right here on YouTube, and those links will be available in the video's description as well. And leave your likes and comments for us. We would love to hear from you. You can send us a comment, on our YouTube channel or on our socials. You can also email us. You can email us on our official podcast email, kimmell@gmail.com. Talk to us. We'd love to talk to you. We just want you to join in on the conversation with us, and that just makes it more fun for us. And we don't have to just always sit here and listen to each other talk. We can bring you guys in on the fun. And be sure to check out our Patreon page as well. We need your support. We can't do this without you. We can, but it's certainly a lot easier if we have the support of people like you, our viewers and listeners. So definitely go on there and check out some of the benefits that we're offering there. Most importantly, be sure to subscribe, like, and share here on our YouTube channel. And when you subscribe, make sure that you remember to tap that bell icon so that you're receiving all of the notifications whenever new content is posted. That's all the time we've got for you today. And we hope you'll join us next week. And in the meantime, be good to yourselves, and we'll see you next time.